Welcome, Charlotta Tönsgård. Welcome, the stage is yours.
Okay, so now I'm on. So hi, my name is Charlotta Tönsgård and I'm the CEO of Min Doktor. And to be honest with you, this is a completely new context for me to be talking in. I've been at Dagens Medicin and I've been talking in front of stakeholders in government and regions. But I was really excited when I was invited here, because one of the amazing things and challenging things with Min Doktor is that we're trying to work to combine being a caregiver with looking at growth and users in the way that you would expect from any modern new tech startup. And I won't really show you the service here today, so if you're interested in download the app or go into mindoktor.se. Instead, I thought I would focus on the challenges you face when you try to merge these two worlds. My long-term goal is to build a global scalable company, such as Spotify or Uber. But if we succeed, Min Doktor's effect will be far outside kind of the realm of being cool technology or even convenience. We hope and want to be part of the solution for one of the largest problems we're seeing in society today. And to give you some context, I thought I would start off there instead. I believe that everyone here is aware of the challenges we're facing in healthcare today. It's not something unique for Sweden, but something we see on a global scale. And it's not just about aging population and increasing healthcare needs, but what we see is also a shift in behavior in the users. Earlier this summer, you could see in Sweden large headlines in all the media saying that our emergency care had the lowest productivity in all of Scandinavia. And this wasn't actually a problem with the healthcare we perform at our emergency care unit. So one of the reasons given? Well, it was actually that our primary care units doesn't work from an end user perspective. And what happens when the user don't get the care and the attention that they require? Well, they move on. And you can definitely shake your head at this and say that, okay, people should actually know better. Our emergency care units, they're there if you're in a car accident or if you have a heart attack. And in the situation we're in, it's very easy for the stakeholders, the politicians and the decision makers to start focusing on savings and see how you can reduce the use of care. And we're already seeing that. Limit the temporary staff, increase the threshold for you as a patient by, for example, increasing the patient fee or introducing more requirements for referrals. But I'm absolutely convinced that the only way to curb this development is, on the contrary, to dare to meet people where they are. In the midst of a crisis where everyone is screaming lack of resources, we have to do even more, but we need to do it with less resources. Because the behavior we see in some patients today, it will only spread to more. Because the accessibility and control that you would expect from all other services you meet, you will also require from healthcare. And at Min Doktor, we are convinced that the real problem is neither lack of resources or overusage of care, it's how we use the resources and how we, in a cost-efficient way, can give the user the right level of care. All public and private stakeholders must completely reevaluate how you deliver care if we are to meet the challenges we see today and also the ones that we see in the future. And this is what Min Doktor is doing for primary care. But to explain what I mean, it's actually easier to look at a completely different industry. So if we have a look at the Swedish banking industry and what happened the last kind of decade. So if we go back 10, 15 years, a meeting at the bank was the meeting with the bank. I think you probably remember that we had to go there to pay our bills, to transfer money, and to update our account. So what happened when they started to digitalize towards their end user? Well, they didn't put a webcam between you and the cashier. Instead, they used technology that was already common to the users, and they used this to transform a whole way of working. Using technology to give the end user what they required, but also to optimize the use of the not so scalable human resource. And this basically had two effects. First, you as a user actually became the driver of your own journey with the bank. But at the same time, the bank transferred quite a lot of the work that they themselves previously had to do to you and to the system behind it. And this is what Min Doktor is doing for primary care and what we're preparing to scale globally. We let the patient begin her journey with us wherever and whenever she chooses, 24/7. We use structured data collection to make sure that the patient prepares themselves before they meet the doctor. And we use machine learning to continuously update and improve the information used by the doctor. And we allow the patient and doctor to decide themselves which means of communication they should use in order to use both parties' time efficiently. In case the doctor decides you should go for tests, or if you need a prescriptive drug, of course that happens too. And all of this combines makes it possible for us to give the patient a quick personal consultation, but with an enormous increase in efficiency. Recent studies have shown that about 70% of primary care is suitable for this type of service. That means about 12 million visits per year. And according to McKinsey, digitalization can contribute to huge savings, up to about 180 billion Swedish crowns until 2025. A reduced number of visits, unnecessary visits, are counted as the largest savings, and just remote consultation stands for about 20 billion Swedish crowns a year. But what does that actually mean for you and me? Well, it means that there will be fewer patients on the phone and in the waiting room, actually giving time and space for those who need a physical consultation. The care in Sweden is in world class, so don't get me wrong, that is not what we need to innovate. What Min Doktor is innovating is the meeting between the patient and the doctor, and the division of labor between them and the system behind it. And I'm guessing that most of you probably have never heard about Min Doktor before today. But we're actually the largest digital caregiver in Sweden. We have treated about 35,000 patients so far, and as far as we know, we are the ones in Europe who has treated the most patients digitally so far. And we have been growing quickly. Most of these 35,000 patients have actually been treated the last 12 months. We were founded in 2014, so we're only a few years old, and we have our offices here in Malmö. And that is, of course, we who do go to the office, which is about 65 people today. Mostly developers, marketing, tech design, but also clinicians, doctors, midwives, and nurses, all working together to improve the service and, of course, handling the day-to-day operation. Our 35 doctors that is currently working in the service, they all work from their mobile phones, wherever and whenever it suits them, of course, in a user-friendly and safe environment. So we are a caregiver, but we're also a product developer, creating both the app for the patient and the doctor. But if we look a little bit into the future, what Min Doktor is doing is actually building a factory for care. I think many of you maybe cringed when you heard that, maybe all of you. But I promise you, if we look back 10 years from now, we will laugh about the fact that we had to stand in line or wait on the line for the phone for an hour to talk to a nurse, to actually physically take time away from work, walk down to the care center just to have someone look at our rash. I promise you we will laugh about that the same way we do when we think about going to the bank to pay our bills, or the fact that we actually went to a video store to rent a movie. Because digitalization, the whole point of digitalization, is using human knowledge, human with vast knowledge, where they make the most difference, making the human interaction and also the personal connection. Because these are things that artificial intelligence and AI and systems aren't doing that well so far. We should, however, use AI to make sure that the humans can do their work even better and not waste time on things that can be served to them. I mean, look at the TV chef. Just because the TV chefs get their vegetable chopped up and placed in bowls, it doesn't mean that it's not their recipe, or it's not the chef that makes the magic when you actually do the cooking. I mean, I own a Noma cooking book. It doesn't make me a Michelin chef. One of the biggest challenges, though, when doing this kind of transformation is habit. There is no explicit demand for online care. And we're facing at Min Doktor probably the similar challenges as I imagine Spotify did when they first launched their service. There was a huge market for CDs and music, but when Spotify came along saying, no, you shouldn't own your music, you should rent it, and you should pay a monthly subscription fee instead, they did have quite a lot of job in front of them. Because it meant getting people to change habit and behavior. And same goes for Min Doktor. There is a huge partially at least, unmet demand for healthcare. And we do have a more convenient and resource-efficient way to provide it. but there is no explicit demand for seeking care online. As I think a lot of you have experienced, being a pioneer, it means that you cannot focus on just creating something great and hope that it catches on. It can happen, and if it does, I mean, that is great. But most likely is that you will have to spend a considerable time and effort in letting people know that you exist, by, for example, marketing. But even traditional marketing won't take you the whole way. You will also need to educate and inform people, politicians in your industry, other relevant groups, to let them know that you exist. By doing so, they actually have to take you into consideration when they continue to do their stuff. And hopefully it make your own area more relevant and give you time and space to have more opportunity to influence and affect. But except for staying on top of mind of the user, one of the biggest challenges we see is, of course, getting our patients to feel trust and to understand that they are getting a personal consultation the same way they would if they would visit a traditional primary care unit. Because in the end, there is a huge difference between buying your airline tickets and actually seeking care. I mean, Doctor is still very early on this journey, so I don't want to stand here and pretend that we have all the answers. But I thought I'd walk you through 3 of the findings that we have seen so far in our research, but also in our interaction with the patients. Min Doktor is a caregiver, and of course, everything here is about the meeting. So what makes a difference when you want to create a personal meeting within healthcare? Well, both doctors and healthcare are based on a very old conception about authority. The doctor-patient relationship and this division of power, it's old as time. And the doctor is an all-knowing, powerful entity. And how about us as a patient? Well, we're a sickness. We're a person with a problem. We're definitely not part of the solution. And generally speaking, today we are much more aware of our bodies and our health. We track how we eat, how we sleep, how we move. And we have access to vast knowledge online that is very much consumed, maybe not at all with so much scrutiny as would be needed. But in this new landscape, we want and we need more control, information and transparency. We no longer accept being passive patients. And there is a disruption happening within healthcare that is not connected to Min Doktor. What we see is a movement towards an empowered patient. And depending from which situation you come into this, normally people see this either as something that needs to be managed or something that is a resource that should be embraced. One of the first steps in creating a personal meeting is believing the patient and believing that the patient actually need help, regardless of the difference in perception of when you should seek help. All patients are unique and they deserve to be heard. And this might sound obvious from you coming from an e-commerce perspective, but this is a considerable change in how healthcare is structured today. And this is something that Min Doktor has been having to defend more than one occasion. And even today, many argue that the patient can't be trusted with their own medical status. If we take it down to something that's been connected to our own business, one of the popular reasons to use our service today is to renew your contraceptives. But depending on which contraceptives you use, you need to provide a blood pressure to make sure that you're not at risk for certain side effects. But how do we know that the value provided by the patient is correct? Does the blood pressure needs to be taken by a nurse and sent to us in some kind of super secure, verified way? From a medical perspective, it turns out that it doesn't really matter who's taken the blood pressure as long as it's been taken on an approved device. But how do we know that the patient isn't lying? This, of course, is no way for us to know this. All we can do is inform the woman that this is very important and to explain that if you can't use this contraceptive, there are alternatives for you to use. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of situations in the traditional healthcare where the doctor relies on the patient's history or what the patient tells you only. But even so, it took us almost a month to kind of work through all the rules, regulations, traditions, and preconceptions before we could determine that, yes, it is okay for us to trust the patient. And there is, of course, a flip side to this too. Democratization and showing trust also means sharing responsibility. And most patients today aren't ready and prepared to get the impression that they are going through a self-service. Here the devil is in the details. It's not enough for you to get questions asked to you by a computer. It needs to be an interview that is designed by a doctor. By forcing the patient to prepare themselves before they meet the doctor, we're also setting a level playing field, which is the next step for the conversation between the doctor and the patient. Because the patient will not only have answered the question the doctor needs to know, but they have also become aware of which context the doctor is, which is important for the doctor to be able to treat this kind of ailment. But democratization of healthcare doesn't mean that the customer is always right. Our doctors can't and won't prescribe things just because the patient asks of it. As a caregiver, we of course adhere to really strict rules regarding what kind of prescription we can do, what kind of care we are giving. So if we go back to my example with the internet bank, just because the bank allows you to apply for a loan online, it doesn't mean that the loan is automatically approved. The same thing goes for us as a caregiver. We of course need to be the ones who decide which is the right level of care. But instead of trying to push the user away, we need to spend the time informing and educating the user why a certain path is the right way to take to become better. Next, we have found that it's very, very important that this consultation, which is the next step in the process, feels like a conversation and not a transaction. One of the not so uncommon comments we get from our user survey is that I've never felt this seen in healthcare before. And this is even though in most cases no one has ever seen this person. Most of the communication is based on text. And of course this ties back to the fact that a meeting is complex and not necessarily tied together with visual or voice conversation. And we know that just because a doctor is really good in a traditional context, it doesn't mean that they become a very good digital doctor. Because normally the things that become important when you sit together in a room will have a different meaning when you have to communicate over some other link. When digitalization enters the care, one of the most prevalent comments we get is that now we're kind of removing the humanity from a part of our lives, which is very much based about the human interaction. And as already mentioned, the best doctors, they take you seriously. They know their limit, and they do refer you to someone else when they know that these limits have been passed. And it's hard not to be melancholic if you think about the situation where the doctor had your whole family history and they knew how to treat you no matter what you came, they had your history. They knew you from cradle to grave. But for most people, this is not true anymore. It's been quite a long time since we had this situation. And here technology can instead become the bridge between the visits and the interaction you have with the healthcare, allowing the doctor to stay one step ahead of the patients instead of waiting for them to come with their needs. But we have to do this without burdening the doctor, but instead relying on the system and the technology to make sure they always stay on top. And many of the types of cases that Min Doktor is handling from a medical perspective is classed as simple. It doesn't mean that it's trivial from a patient point of view, and we need to keep pushing the boundaries of what is possible to do and can be handled from the service. But again, from a medical and user perspective, it's important to remember that no matter how much the pain or discomfort, managing a nasty rash or a urinary tract infection is not the same thing as preparing for a journey ahead if you just found out you have cancer. At Min Doktor, we believe that it's really, really important when going through this phase of digitalization that we can't be a quick fix for the whole healthcare system. We have chosen to focus on a very specific area in healthcare where we know we can excel, both from a user perspective but also from a medical perspective. But the simple cases we handle today, they already cover about 20% of all the visits in primary care. And from an end user perspective, that means that you should never ever stay on a queue on a phone or inside a doctor's office for these type of ailments. You should do it in a way that is convenient for you, but also leave space for the ones who need a physical visit. But it's important to remember that doctors aren't commodities and we can't treat them as such. Even though many of our everyday health concerns aren't acute from a medical perspective, we're probably at our very most vulnerable when we do seek care. So merging e-commerce and healthcare is not an easy task, and Min Doktor, we treat the trust our patients give us with the utmost humility and respect. Because we do have an ambition to build a global scalable company where we can provide equal care to everyone. But we need to do so by taking one very, very careful step at a time. Thank you.
One quick question.
So this is a kind of a new phenomenon here in Sweden. Where on the globe do we find other countries that are ahead of us in terms of going this way?
I think it's difficult to say. There's not kind of one country where we are very much ahead. We have seen, when looking at digitalization, there are kind of different ways of viewing this. And I think looking at remote consultations, India, for example, they have quite a lot of different initiatives. The US, if you look at telemedicine, they also have quite a lot. But looking at the kind of taking care of a specific area within healthcare and doing the whole thing, I think we are still early. Europe is among the kind of areas where we see the most right now.
A very warm welcome to the e-commerce world, Charlotta.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.